Hey, Grace Bible Church, this is your video blog. This is June 14th, and today's topic is going to be about sexual sin. This is our last video blog for our series on biblical counseling. We've looked at several main issues that we might face as it relates to discipling one another in the church. We've talked about forgiveness and unforgiveness. We've talked about guilt, how someone's conscience, whether it be a conscience that's uninformed or it's a sensitive conscience, how guilt can play a part in that. And last time we were together, we talked about conflict and how to resolve conflict in a biblical way. But today's issue is sexual sin. And I want to help us think about how to shepherd those in our midst who might be facing this very demoralizing struggle. There are two things I want us to talk about today as it relates to helping others. And these are really not how to, fix their issue. This is really perspectives that we need as biblical counselors and as those who are shepherding someone in this struggle to help them understand the root of their issue and helping them gain victory in their lives. So please don't look at this treatment today of this issue as an exhaustive treatment. This is just the means by which we can help others. So there are two things that we want to consider as it relates to this very important issue. Is first, sexual sin is a common sin we all face. When we think about sexual sin, a lot of times our mind instantly goes to pornography and men. But let me just say this. In our sex-saturated culture, that's just not true anymore. The truth is this: both men and women struggle with sexual sin. We need to realize that this is a common struggle across the board in our world today. And sadly, possibly, it is even in the church in greater numbers than we actually realize. Listen, we need to create a culture where there is freedom to express our struggles without feeling condemnation. And I think one way we can do that is through what 1 Corinthians 10:13 says. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, "No temptation has overtaken you, but such is common to man." Now listen to that. Do you understand what Paul's saying? Is that all temptation is a common reality for all of humanity. And what Satan wants to do is to lie to us and tell us we're the only ones struggling with this sin. When in reality, he knows that there are many people struggling with this sin. And I think there's victory, there is freedom when we understand that, hey, maybe I'm not alone in this struggle. Maybe there are others who are struggling with this sin just like me. Now, typically, we usually think about sexual sin as it relates to men as being a visual thing, where men are visually stimulated, moving to physical sin. And when we think of women, we characterize them as being stimulated emotionally that leads to a physical sin. Well, that could be some generalizations that we need to understand, but actually, the sexual sin that we all face has its root in our hearts. That's the second thing I wanted to be reminded of today, is that sexual sin is not just some external thing that we need to remove out of our lives so that we can be pure, like, putting filters on our computers, removing all negative content out of our life, making sure women wear modest clothes. Yeah, all of those things are great and we should do those things. But listen, until we recognize that sexual sin is a sin of the heart, we will never truly grasp victory in this area. Jesus said this. Listen to what Jesus says. Matthew 5 says this. He says, "You have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you, everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Then he says, "If your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out and throw it from you." And then skipping to verse 30, he says this, "If your right hand makes you stumble, cut it off and throw it from you." What is Jesus saying here? Ultimately, Jesus is saying that you can be faithful to the commandment, don't commit adultery. But ultimately, externally being faithful to that, yes, is possible. But are you being faithful internally? Are you being faithful to not lust in your heart after others? You see, Jesus is basically telling us lust in the heart leads to looking with the eyes and touching with the hands. You see, until we subdue the issues of our heart, we will never subdue the lust that resides there, because it will lead to action. These are things we need to help others realize. We need to help others realize that it is a common reality for all men and women to face this issue. And this is an issue of the heart. Grace Bible Church, there is so much more that could be said about this. But my prayer is these two truths out of the Word of God will help get us started in shepherding one another as it relates to this issue of sexual sin. Listen, we're looking forward to a great Sunday. This coming Sunday, we're going to continue our look at John chapter 3. I hope you are able to be there, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday. God bless.